And welcome to this week's edition of Victory Never Sleeps. Anyone who is listening and not watching this broadcast today started out with a moment of silence for a deceased member of our AFA family that passed away since the last broadcast, Travis Selly. Sad situation, and he will definitely be missed. But it's not a grim broadcast today, but I do think it's important that we acknowledge the passing of members of our community, and if we can honor them, great. If we can learn something from the situation, even better. And I think it starts a show of bits and pieces that we are going to try to put together in a way that Alan has the loudest chair on this broadcast, but we have bits and pieces that'll hopefully we can put together into something useful and helpful to everybody who's listening. So, Alan, welcome to the program. Thank you for being on and sharing your wisdom with us this evening. I think a really good place to start, if I may, because we're on the topic, is a few things that I want to say, and I think you may have some input specifically on the second piece of this. First, unfortunately, Travis's method of passing was that he took his own life. That is something that is all too common amongst specifically our men, and in particular in the Asatru Folk Assembly, we have seen far too much of that. I'd like to, it goes without saying, but it needs to be said. It's what our Gothar are here for. If you are struggling, please talk to one of us. If, hopefully long before you get to the point that's something you're thinking about. But specifically, if that's something you are considering, please talk to one of our Gothar. It's one thing that we talk about on the back end, that we always want to make ourselves available at a moment's notice to have that conversation with someone if that's where they are feeling they're at. Something else that I think we all know, but I think it's also my job to say out loud. I get that things can be extremely bleak in the moment. And one thing that I do learn more and more as I get older is that things that seemed devastating and impossible to get past when I was 21 or 23 or 35 or whatever, I now look back in the rearview mirror and, they don't seem nearly as big. When you make permanent choices to temporary problems, I think logic tells you it's something that down the road you would regret given the opportunity. But another thing that I'd like to, suppose to be selfish about, if you've made that decision, I'd ask the favor, please give us a shot at talking you out of it. Something you're going to do, you can do it 10 minutes later and make a phone call first so that we at least felt like we could try to make it a little bit better. And who knows, may make a better product. But if you would please do us the favor of reaching out and letting us take a swing at it before you finalize that decision. But yeah, and then the second part of that, I've mentioned on broadcast a lot of times the importance of doing a will. Not only the importance of doing a will, first, do one. Have it with your lawyer, have it with trusted family members, trusted friends, do all of that. In particular, to people on this broadcast and Asatru Folk Assembly members, get a will done and get a original copy registered with our law speaker here, because Alan has agreed to be the keeper of those things. And if they're in his possession, to act on your behalf to try to see that your will is executed in the way that you want. It doesn't have to be costly, doesn't have to be difficult. DoYourOwnWill.com. Yes, it really is that simple. DoYourOwnWill.com. I think I did mine in 10 minutes. Yes, go the extra step of printing 2 out and having a notary and witnesses sign them and do that and then send it to Alan. Does not have to be a difficult thing, but it is a very important thing. It is important if you have assets. It's important if you have children that you want to take care of, who is going to see to their raising. But it's also extremely important on your funeral service and what you would like done with your remains and how you would like to be remembered. I would urge all of you to please take me seriously and please do that. I have known a great many people in my time as Altair Gothi who saw it coming and continued to procrastinate until they ended up passing without a will done. And most of those people did not get what they wanted because they did not have a will like I am talking about. Please do your will. And please, if your life is looking so bleak that you are considering ending it, please talk to one of us and give us the opportunity to talk to you while you're still with us. Thank you for that. Alan, this is kind of your show, though I did think of some notes and stuff I'd like to talk about when appropriate, but go ahead and take us on the journey that you have planned for us.
Well, plan would certainly overstate it for tonight. I wanted to sort of do, like, I would say the year in review, or maybe the episodes in review that we've talked about so far. And just to reiterate a couple things that, first of all, let me, certainly to back up what you said, absolutely talk, if you feel despair, talk to one of us. I mean, I've been there, you've been there. Life is struggle. Especially for those of us of a traditionalist bent in this era of the Kali Yuga and the, in the decline and fall of Western civilization, we are an island of correctness in an ocean of madness. So it often does seem like that we are alone, but you're not. I mean, there are lots of people who feel the same. There are lots of Gothar who have fought that struggle and, find meaning in life. So, yes, by all means, call them, call me. We will talk to you without judgment.
So proof of concept, there have been at least 3 people that I know of that have reached out at moments they were considering that are still with us because they chose to reach out at that moment. And maybe it's because they talk to a really awesome Gofi. I think that more importantly, they created an opportunity for someone to try to help and for the gods to work in their life in a very particular way that opportunity wouldn't have been there if they didn't make the phone call. So it does work sometimes.
Big time, big time. And just to know that you're not alone, I think that, and that is a big part of the modern condition. And one of the things that we've talked about on the show before is that despite the internet connectedness that has brought us together in this way, that is kind of the best and worst of all worlds. Because of the internet, people are not connected to the people who are close to them physically, maybe a little more spiritually, but it's hard to get a hug online. You know what I mean? So, so this world is kind of the best and worst of all times. One of the reasons I started doing this series, just, is I feel like that that the purpose of our faith, the purpose of a religious practice, is to help us to be whole people. And I was actually watching a video from a friend of ours, non-member, who talks about Germanic religious practice, and he reiterated something I already knew, that about whole, holy, holistic, those all having the same root words. So part of the goal of certainly my personal religious practice and other stuff that I do, and hopefully a part of the way that the church approaches these things, is to make us all whole people. That, like, unlike Christianity, we don't think that you can believe the certain thing and be okay. We are who we are what we do. To quote, oh God, who's the guy in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? You are what you do. You know what I'm talking about. It's Quado. Yes. You are what you do. So I
would rather quote Swain Wodening that we are our deeds, but Quado wisdom is welcome as well.
I don't have a Yoda appropriate quote, so Quado has to do. So being intact, eating well, but not overdoing it, exercising, but not overdoing it, acting as a good citizen, without necessarily going to extremes. Those are the sorts of things that, it seems to me, make us whole people, because inside your brain, inside my brain at least, I'm not comfortable with myself unless I can damp down the cognitive dissonance. Okay. And cognitive dissonance comes about when you say you do one thing or you believe one thing, but you act in a different way from that. So mindfulness, then, being engaged in all the acts that you do on a day-to-day basis. One of the things, even though we divide the world into the sacred space where we do ritual, the rest of the world is still holy. So the way that you act with other people, the way that you act with animals, those are all in their own way an exercise of your whole being, your holy being. And so one of the things I try to do with myself, and hopefully with all of us now, is to engage that whole being in the way that you work in the world, and make that more comfortable for yourself, and for those around you. And some of it, and just like the people that you've talked about that were dissuaded from suicide from conversations with Gothar, I think it's just a way of validating our worldview, the way that we, Asatru, view the world is, is the proper way. We are not the children of Descartes who think that the world is divided into man and not man, that, that we are, the whole world is holy in its own way, which doesn't mean I don't eat animals, but I just think they should be treated with respect. So anyway, that's part of it. And then like to go through a lot of the things we've talked about. I would like to think that maybe there are some people who have questions that, and would range on any topic that we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about. But, I think the thing that has resonated a lot with people is the discussion that I've done here and with several people personally about debt counseling. And certainly, for those who don't know, I'm a bankruptcy attorney. I practice debtor bankruptcy, file bankruptcies for people and companies. But because of that, I've developed a very skeptical eye toward credit of any type. In the modern world, of course, you can't get a mortgage. You can't get a house without a mortgage unless you're very lucky. But aside from a mortgage, I strongly discourage anyone from taking on debt for any reason. Cars might be an exception, but even then, like so many people, and I know the clients that I see are the people who have made a series of bad decisions, but most of the time, people trade in, for example, they trade in a car that still has years of useful life left in it. As soon as they get it paid for, or even before it's paid for, they trade in negative equity and start. The analogy I use is I tell them you're driving around a big anchor out there. You've got $15,000 in debt on a car that's worth $8,000, or you've got $40,000 in debt on a car that's worth $25,000. And there's no way that makes any kind of financial sense. A friend of mine out here where I live is a mechanic. And I drove up there one day and there was a guy up there in like an 83 Suburban that was rusted and, 3 different colors of paint. And that guy is a multimillionaire who owns tens of thousands of acres in Leon. Sorry, that's probably wrong. It's thousands of acres in Leon County, but that's how you protect and preserve wealth, is by not spending money. I saw it again recently. We spend money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And we're finally getting to a point, I think, certainly within the Asatru community, maybe within the traditionalist community at large, that we're getting past that. Who cares what kind of car you drive? As long as it gets you to work. Who cares what kind of shoes you wear? I certainly don't. Not that I'm any gauge. We also have to recognize we should also recognize the value of quality over quantity. It's better to own one nice pair of shoes than 17 pairs of Payless shoes. It's better to own one nice jacket than 7 that are, 7 cheap ones. And again, that is an indication that we, in the modern American experience, one of the things that we do to validate ourselves is to go out and buy stuff, right? That gives us a certain power over our environment, that we can take this paper we take this piece of plastic that we have in our wallet and go out and change bring in some new stuff. It's not healthy. That's not a healthy way of interacting with reality. That, buying stuff doesn't make you a bigger person or a better person. It just means you've been trapped in the in the consumerist trap. Rowdy Roddy Piper, borrow a pair of his glasses, and you'll see that commercial advertisements are not doing anything other than trying to ensnare you in a terrible, terrible distortion of our culture. And it still troubles me in one of my many troubles, the fact that it remains one of the biggest growth industries in the United States is these self-storage buildings, right? And there are 2 under construction between my house and my job. So, and they're already all over the place. And that's because we have all this other junk that we don't need and can't use, and we're out of space for it. So first of all, we have bigger houses, bigger apartments than we've ever had before, and yet that's still not enough room. We have all this other crap that we have to find somewhere else to put it. It's just absurd. Have less, have better stuff, and spend time with your kids, spend time with your dog, do stuff, get a hobby, don't shop. So that's a big part of that. Matt,
so a good segue
in that vein.
Well, that will save you money. And what can you do with that money? You can support the causes of the Asatru Folk Assembly. So a couple of people started off donating to the show. I want to acknowledge them and give kind of heads up where we're at on the stuff we're raising money for. Jeffrey in Texas, frequent donor to the program, donated $15 each towards Sigerheim Pavilion and the Baldershoff steeple. So we appreciate you, Jeffrey. Thank you very much. Gilbert, a constant donor on the program and very much appreciated, donated $150 towards Phrasehoff, towards paying off the debt to Phrasehoff. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. And Brent in Canada gave 60 United States dollars towards Phrasehoff. We appreciate that. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Kind of letting you know where we're at on those things. Could you go ahead and put the pavilion situation up for us? Wonderful. Still got $26,081 we're trying to raise on it. Don't let that be discouraging. We have already raised $8,919, not including what has been generated through this program today. So we're about a third of the way there. Thank you very much, everybody who has donated. I'm looking forward to, matter of fact, I was having a conversation today about getting the earthwork done and then plans on getting the cement foundation poured. So we're making good progress. You guys are awesome. Thank you for that. And then, Nick, where are we at on paying off Phrasehoff? Keep in mind, we just dedicated Phrasehoff on the 6th of December, and we are 42.6% paid off already. So we got $71,694 remaining. Comes out to just about $98 per AFA member would pay that off instantly just for digestibility. So thank you guys. Appreciate y'all so much. Anybody who's interested in donating to any of the things we're raising money for, runestone.org/donate. And we appreciate everybody's generosity.
And one way to get there, to interrupt your thought, one way to get there is, like, if your habit is, you go by that green coffee place that I refuse to name and buy a $4 cup of coffee every morning, you could make your own coffee for 50 cents a day and donate us the extra $1.50 for a month. And, that'd be $50 a month. We'd be well on our way.
I think so. One thing that I think is really important to the stuff that Alan is talking about, and it relates to this, recognizing small, consistent goals that you can track and doing them, and how big of an impact that they do make over time. One thing again, on the cares what kind of car you drive kind of thing. I know some people do. I'm not that guy though. I care about saving money on gas. This is my Prius with my rebel flag on the front. In our current geopolitical times, I'm glad that I have not been paying as much gas as the rest of you guys have been on this last little bit. That shocks me how much money I save in gas for what would be the case if I was driving a different vehicle. But like on what Alan said, $1 a day every month, it's $30. That isn't nothing. A small change, but added up every day for a year makes a big difference. A lot of things that you don't notice make a tremendous impact over time, and that is on anything. One of the things I've noticed a lot, and something that we talk on here a lot about, specifically on some of the shows with Alan and I, is getting in better shape in physical fitness things. Be that you're trying to gain muscle, be that you're trying to lose fat, or if you're trying to reach a performance benchmark. It is daunting to find yourself, 30% body fat over where you want to be, and the only thing you see is the finish line, because it's a very long time to get there. But if you take measurements and you track those things on a scheduled weekly basis or monthly or whatever your situation, you can notice incremental progress and be encouraged to do that next thing or to go that next month and see where it is. Finding ways to make small changes and small progress and then noting the difference is huge. And I think that is a key to most any change that we want to make. Is it comes, I think in goal setting, and I think that's important to our people as a whole. We have a lot of people that wait until the perfect opportunity to do things and don't do anything until they find it. Spoiler alert, that perfect opportunity usually doesn't come, and they spend their life adorning couches. If you don't wait for perfect, but you do have an attainable thing, once you accomplish it, you build a momentum towards the next attainable thing. I think that most often it's not the huge victory. You get there by stacking small victory upon small victory until you get closer. And if you're doing it, no matter what, you're in an optimum position to jump if there's the big victory presents itself. But realistically, success with any of the things we do is stacking small things one on another. And I think another piece to that is that you have to form habits. I'm going to say you have to form habits. I don't know if you do. I have to form habits. And I think that most of us have to form habits. It is hard to change a way of behaving, be it a big way or a small way, if it deviates from your norm. Especially the older you are, the more set in your ways you are, the more you have other conflicting habits. But it takes a little bit. When you develop a habit over the course of months, you have a pull towards that in case you forget. You notice something's off. You notice you didn't do a thing you were supposed to do, and you feel compelled to do it because it has become habit. So form habits.
Right, form good habits. And another thing, and I've been aware of this phenomenon without having a name for it. I still don't remember exactly what the name of it is. But I've got the idea from a talk that I watched recently, and it's like the abstinence phenomenon, right? And if your goal is to lose weight, and you're part of that goal, like you say, I'm not going to eat any carbs. I'm not going to eat any simple carbs at all. But then you break that, like you have a slice of pizza or you have a piece of cake, then it's like you fall all the way off the wagon. So then you just spend the whole weekend binge eating Doritos or Cheetos, which is my personal favorite, but either way. The goal here too is to have kind of, like you said, incremental steps, number one, but also recognize that you're going to make progress some days and some days you're going to slide back, and that's okay. You can make coffee 4 days a week, and then once a week you can treat yourself to, well, we have Lucky Goat here in Tallahassee, which is a local brewery. So that's where I go on the days I feel like a frozen coffee latte or whatever it is they make. I go to the local place because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you should do. But not very often. Most of the time, I'm saving that money by brewing coffee at home. We cook at home. We don't eat out a lot. We don't eat fast food, which is terrible for you all the way around. So if we want to go out to eat and have a nice meal, we go to a local place, someplace that cooks the food on site. Fast food is a terrible idea. Corporations hate you. The food hates you. It's bad for you. So you're much better off making a ham sandwich and taking that to work instead of eating whatever it is fast food slop is throwing out the window at you.
Except the Domino's Chicken Ranch Pizza, that loves you. That is the exception. It is only made with the most immaculate ingredients that are the key to good health. No point taken. But I will say at random, that has become my cure for the sniffles. If I got a cold or something, usually it does not keep me down more than about a day or so, because I hit it hard and fast with junk food, and the excess carbs and fats cure me with their delicious magics.
No, it's the sickness that is generating in your liver from the fast food just overwhelms your body. It's like we're going to ignore this little sniffle because now we have some really bad stuff going on.
See, science. Trust the science.
Science.
But that's neither here nor there.
So while you're thinking of that, I want to say one thing about this mug here. This was an unexpected and wonderful gift from one of our members. I don't know if she'd want to be named or not, but she said actually her husband bought it and gave it to her to send to me. So thank you for my wonderful mug. I always drink my tea and honey in it. Although I don't drink black tea because black tea has fluoride in it. You're not supposed to take in fluoride. But so I'm drinking hot, liver cleanse. But speaking of honey, there you go. Or alcohol if that's your thing. I pulled 5 gallons of honey out of my hives last weekend. Dug that and spun it. So, sorry, it's weekend before last because last weekend was we had kind of a drought here in early spring, so the honey crop is a little depressed from where it was last year, but we did make honey. I'm grateful to my bees for working so hard so I could steal their product. I actually, in the early days of the pagan listservs, we had one of the members, not AFA members, obviously, but one of the members of that listserv arguing that beekeeping was slavery. Because, we've got bees in there and we're making them work so we can have the product of their labors. Exactly. That t-shirt on t-shirt hell with the picture of the pyramids. slavery gets shit done.
So that said, in our review of topics discussed, do you have a scheme for that, or are we just shooting from the hip?
We're basically shooting from the hip. I've covered the couple three things that I really wanted to re-emphasize. I guess I could talk. The other thing that I think about from time to time, we used to call Asatru the religion with homework. Like we expected, and I think it was an expectation, like in the long time ago, in the ancient days of 2007 when I was first a member, like everybody expected, there was this expectation of the forerunners who had made it into the faith that everybody should understand all this complicated intricacy of the way all these faith points interact. And I still believe that to be true. I think it is absolutely valid. And as I tell new people or people who are exploring our faith for the first time or considering, inching their way into the door, say, you don't have to understand all these three levels that many of the myths address. You don't have to understand, how the staff works as the axis mundi, and what it was that the warrior was trying to pull up when he's fishing Jormungand out from the bottom of the ocean. You don't have to really grab all that stuff. If you are heterosexual European, and believe in religion, then you're already one of us, and so you don't have to dig into all the finesse of the religion. I mean, if you read, as I used to think I was going to do, like if you read the Apologia of St. Augustine or any of these other long-winded Christian theologians, like they dig down way into what Christianity means or what they think it means. Most Christians don't understand any of that stuff and don't care, and you don't, and our practitioners, all you have to know is that there is a place for you in the shield wall. There's a place for you among the folk. You are already us. And, it is the job of the ulterior Gothi and Savan Harold to understand all this stuff. And the rest of us are just helping row the boat.
Well, so this is kind of a favorite topic of mine and something I would like to add clarity to. I think I come off, or some people perceive me as being dismissive of study or education or whatever. It's not that. It is very much what Alan said, and I think that we need to in our minds understand what is essential to religion and what is a hobby or what is something fun that we like to learn about. Studying about our faith is only essentially religious if it enhances your relationship with the ICER. Now that's not, I don't want to specify. I love to study about Asatru. I love studying about history. Those are fun things that I enjoy. I don't need those things to be an Asatru. I do those things because I love them and it's fascinating, and I do think that it deepens my faith and it deepens my relationships. But fundamentally, you don't need all of that to practice Asatru. There is a generation of people that would nerd out about Asatru being the religion with homework. And I think a couple of things went on there. was having a conversation. Everyone who helped make Midsummer at Odenshoff an awesome event. Thank you guys so much. I had the pleasure of going back out there this last weekend and celebrating Midsummer at Odenshoff. It was amazing. And one of the conversations that I had with one of our folk builders up there was about this very thing. It is surprising how little knowledge our people had about our lore or the history of our ancestors or any of those things when the first generation of our elders started doing this in the 1970s and 1980s. They had to do the homework so they could have things to build upon and context to practice within and to figure those things. To them, it needed to be the religion with homework because they were blazing a new trail and they were having to sometimes work towards getting these things out there. There was a time that the Asatru Free Assembly, our predecessor organization, had to do a write-in campaign to get the Hollander translation of the Poetic Edda republished because you couldn't get a good English translation of the Edda at the time. Their efforts, in early editions of that Hollander Edda, they were noted in the acknowledgments at the beginning that their write-in campaign was part of what got that re-released. So religion with homework thing starts out from a very good place. I think one of the things towards the end of that, though, is you had a lot of basement wizards that wanted to do much more study about Asatru than practice Asatru. And that's kind of where some of my, scoffing at that is. No, studying about Asatru is one of the things I deeply love to do with my life. But this isn't a research project. It is a devotional faith to gods that we build relationship with, that we exchange gift with, that we receive blessings from. And if your study of it draws you away from that personal connection, then it's counterproductive. If it brings you closer, then great. But don't let the study get in the way of the practice.
And it ultimately, too, is it is a tribal practice. So, yes, you can do devotionals on your own, but the modern condition is eons away from where, certainly where it would have been even 200 years ago, much less 2,000 years ago. For some guy to say, I'm a sole practitioner of whatever faith it is that they're practicing would have been not only unknown, but like unknowable to, there were a vanishingly few ascetic monks who lived by themselves, and even then, most of the time they were living in a community of monks. So to say, I'm going to go out here and do this religion by myself is a contradiction in terms. People need people. As corny as that sounds, and folk need folk, and that's how we prevent despair, and we prevent those the feeling of loneliness that so many of us have struggled with, because when we come together, we recognize each other as like we're the same ones. The rest of the world, Disney World and CNN, that's the insanity. For those of us who are together with a right understanding of history, with a right understanding of interpersonal dynamics, with a right understanding of our approach to the eternal, we're right. The rest of those people are messed up. And I say that not to casual friends, but to, I try to pull people back into our side. They should join the team and come in for the big win.
It really is a team sport. The more you come to an understanding of any worldview that our ancestors found familiar, it's about community. It's about finding your place in community. It's about the sharing with family, with friends. It's about the community structure, and it's about practicing our faith as a group. If you are isolated on a desert isle somewhere, okay. And if all you have is to do this by yourself, a lot better than nothing. Given the opportunity, it's always better to practice with other sincere people. It's kind of a fundamental to what this is all about.
Right.
And so this brings me to a rant that I wanted to do tonight. Lately, there has been a criticism, a whatever on social media, and the source of it isn't that important, but the questions brought up are things that I do run into from time to time that I think it's worth addressing and I guess explaining a little bit. And it's hard because we've developed these short form arguments online that are tedious and faceless, but I did want to present like why we do some of the things we do that I think there's people who genuinely don't understand, and I think there's other people that just want to be contrarian.
No.
So something that has always been a source of confusion is the Scandinavians, or certain Scandinavians. They make a basic assumption oftentimes that they are the experts on Asatru because the place that stuff got written down was in Scandinavia. Therefore, without any, or sometimes very, very little actual understanding of any of those sources or any of doing this, that they are the experts and that we must be clueless because we're silly Americans and don't understand. One thing that I think is fundamental: you don't osmose Asatru through proximity. That doesn't do that. Another thing that's important, we are exactly, again, I don't know the age of the person, but within the reasonable error of a human lifetime, the exact same number of generations removed are, my ex-great-grandparents and their ex-great-grandparents from the original practitioners of our faith. We have been not Asatru in our family line for exactly the same amount of time. There's no proprietary relationship because a Scandinavian's ancestors stayed in Scandinavia, whereas my ancestors traveled from there to other places. These logical things, I think, affect how we perceive what we do. So another thing that they have that I run into is this has to be just for Scandinavians. These are our local gods, without the critical thought of what were these gods before your ancestors were in Scandinavia? Did these gods just occur when your ancestors linguistically developed like Proto-Norse? Where were these gods before that for your ancestors that came before that? Do your ancestors live like in Norway? Or do the gods rather live in Norway? These are things that I don't think people think about. I sat in or listening to a discussion people were having the other day, and something that's fundamental and would seem to go without saying, but doesn't. The gods are real. If the gods are like literary characters, then I can see what you see often in works of scholarship, where they contrast the Norse Odin compared to the Anglo-Saxon Woden. Well, no, those are the same person. They're obviously the same person. If the person doesn't exist and it's just a mythological figure, then sure, you can bifurcate them and compare them as separate things. But if it's real and if we actually believe this, which we very much do, clearly they're the same God of the same peoples that are separated by time and geography. If these gods are real, which they are, they don't like cellularly divide every time our folk learn a new language or every time our people conquer a new valley or discover a new continent. That doesn't logically make sense. These are the gods of our race. These are the gods that made us us, and these are the gods that have been with us since the very beginning of our existence. They have traveled with us as our ancestors migrated and conquered and explored from place to place. That only makes sense, and any thought other than that does not treat them as though they are real. It's speculative at an imaginary concept, and that's not what we're doing here. So I think sometimes that is a honest confusion, but it's not one that's very well thought out. I've also heard from a similar group, and it kind of originated out of this. They think that it's really, quote unquote, weird that we're dressing nicely when we do bloat, and that it's strange. Why don't we look, quote, normal like them? It's funny because when they posted a picture, there was a picture of a number of our Gothar dressed nicely at Thorshof. And then the bottom picture was some Scandinavians in ball caps and hoodies and cargo pants. And it took me a second. I was almost going to like the picture because it was so obvious that of the two, we look like we're doing something serious and they don't. But no, I read a little bit further. No, we were the joke in the picture because we had the audacity to wear ties and look nice. It should go without saying, it's ridiculous to mock other people for trying to look nice when approaching the gods. But I think it talks about how it speaks to the fact that we take what we're doing seriously. Scandinavians find it odd sometimes that we wear a tie to do bloat, but a Scandinavian wears a tie to a wedding or to a funeral or to a job interview or to the opera or to a fancy holiday party for their work or to any special occasion. To me, them not doing that when approaching the gods is problematic because it says that they're not treating that as a special event. We are accused of wearing church clothes and doing church things. And I think that's another thing that often causes confusion. And I know that we have an international audience on the show, and I don't presume that every Scandinavian thinks this way. But Swedes that I've known and talked to about this, their parents didn't go to church. Their grandparents didn't go to church. Their great-grandparents didn't go to church. So they're several generations removed from people who had a sincere faith. Whatever that faith might be, religion looks a certain way. And one of the ways it looks is you treat it as something special, not something casual. You treat it literally, we talk about the sacred versus the profane. You treat it as something special. Now that can look different, and certainly it looks different when Indians practice religion or when Japanese practice religion or when Native Americans practice religion. But in any of those cases, you dress ceremonially for something that's special. That's all we're doing is wearing Western clothes that you would wear to something that is semi-formal, something that's elevated in what you do. So that's why we do that. And I, respect that looks different to different people. We certainly don't berate people and demand they dress a certain way on it. But that's the reason we do what we do. And I don't find that odd. It's odd to me that others would find that odd. And so that kind of
once you get in that mindset where, I am in a formal, it just, again, it's that you're elevating your mentation, you're elevating your mindset. I'm putting on my church clothes, if that's the way you want to say it. I'm putting on my bloke clothes to go and meet the gods. Like you wouldn't go to meet the governor in a hoodie and flip-flops. So you shouldn't go to meet your gods in a hoodie and flip-flops. Now, and I know I see a lot of this stuff in being, through this lens, but all of this attitude would have been fundamentally understood even 100 years ago. What has happened is we've been overwhelmed by the communist ideology that the common people are the only thing that is worth celebrating. And so that's where all this dressing down comes from, is from this anti-traditionalist, anti-elitist framework that has been foisted on Western civilization for the last 150 years or so. Look at the pictures of like street pictures from America, probably Sweden too, like in the 1910s, the 1920s, when cameras were first being developed. See what I did there? Developing cameras. So when photography was first coming into vogue, like the street scenes, even the 8, 10, 15-year-old kids have on suits and ties and hats. So to even appear in public at all without a jacket on would have been anathema to a gentleman of any standing at all. So to think that that you should go to your gods dressed in common garb is to portray and embody that lie that has been the underlying cause of the decay of Western civilization for the last 150 years.
Well, so I've got more to say on it, but there's a comment over in the thing. Dress clothes are ceremonial attire. Load is a ceremony. Why wouldn't we wear a ceremony? No, okay. So no, they're following what we're saying. That's fine. I misread. The thing that I want to say that this kind of came down to is them kind of mutually agreeing amongst that camp that, well, that's because Americans are still struggling with the Christian mindset. But as opposed to what? I couldn't deny that a lot of the way that we approach religion does go through a certain amount of Christian lens, because that's the lens that any of us have a familiarity with. But the other side isn't approaching it through some kind of authentic pagan lens. They're approaching it through an atheistic, secular humanist lens. And I would argue at least one is done through like faith and religion, whereas the other is inherently anti-faith, anti-piety, and anti-religion. Church culture, and we said it a lot on here, the Western church, whatever that looks like to you, be it, Roman Catholicism, be it, American Protestantism, whatever it looks extremely different than Middle Eastern Christianity. And it looks extremely different than African Christianity. When Christianity developed, again, before the 20th century, before everything was mixed up and cross-pollinated all the time, you would see it take a very different expression. I would argue that any of the things that they would say are Christian that we do don't have any Middle Eastern components to them whatsoever. They don't have a biblical point of reference. They have, this is how white people practice religion for the last, hundreds and hundreds of years. And so that same level of piety and seriousness is something that we want to apply to a religion that we find serious. I'm sure that if our Asatru ancestors were in a different part of the world, in a different place, in a different climate, the stuff they did would probably look different depending on the place, but the attitude and the reasoning behind it would be very, very similar. And I think it's very authentic the way that we practice Asatru. I think it is a greater challenge for Scandinavians to rediscover what piety is, because their society has lacked piety for generations longer than ours. And ours certainly has as well. You see that regionally within the United States. I think Southerners in areas where there is, till much more recently, very strong religious presence, they access piety much easier than people that are a few generations further removed. They've never seen it modeled. They've never been around pious people. But I would say that piety is not a solely Christian thing. It's a people who genuinely believe the things they say thing. And it's not, oh, Christians are pious, so let's be crass and impious. I would argue that any people of faith in the world, if their faith is sincere, they act piously. You would see that with, Hindus. You would see it with practitioners of native faiths on all continents. You would see that amongst any group of people that's not Abrahamist. Once they're out of that rebellious phase and practicing a sincere religion. And one of the other, and I'll get off the topic here in a second, but one of the things that was also said, and again, much like the picture, it's funny because I 100% agree, but I think the implications are real different between the two people. So the person who was bringing this conversation up was like, yeah, I think their problem is that, see, we're spiritual and they're religious. Yeah, I think that is the problem. And again, I think they see it in a polar opposite way, unfortunately. But yeah, religion's not a bad word. We're religious. You can be spiritual and religious. You can do both of those things. Religion is inherently spiritual, but it is taking spirituality and putting it in a group context. It's elevating it to a practice for others to do that is institutionalized, that is built on something that's going to be there for our children, there for our grandchildren, there for their children, that builds something elevated as opposed to, getting around the fire and being loud. I think that's kind of a encapsulation of the mindset right there. The rejection of the idea of religion is kind of a non-starter if you're trying to practice a religion. And I think it's one of the things that holds a lot of people, and even American Asatru, back, a reluctance to be part of a group, a reluctance to any authority tell you how to do something, which I think we've all been raised with a certain bristle to that we need to overcome as grown people and as serious people. But that kind of factors in a lot. And I just wanted to bring some attention to it because it's a conversation that's been going on in a number of different places. And I don't think that the sincere people who have questions about it understand where we're coming from. But an American that spent their life trying to do this to the best of their ability and has spent their life building a relationship with the ICER through the gift cycle has a better connection to the gods than somebody who just happens to be in Scandinavia and happens to have grown up with, archaeology of pious people surrounding them. If they haven't chosen to make that a part of their life or to build that relationship with the gods or to make this something they're devoted to, you still got to put in the work, even if you live in Scandinavia. But yeah, that's my rant on that. I know we've got some questions stacked on. Do you have other stuff you'd like to present this evening?
Well, always. So a couple of other topics that came to mind, and maybe I'll do them backwards now, because one of the topics that crosses my frontier quite often nowadays is the diminishing attention span of school age young adults, college students, high school students, and it is the general consensus that the cause of that is the cell phone and the computer, that we're so conditioned to consuming short form content that we're unable to process anything longer than a few minutes of argumentation. If you go back to the Douglas Lincoln debates of 1860 or whenever that was, 1859, each of those speakers gave an opening statement that was like an hour and a half long. And I don't mean this just in the sense of political discourse, although certainly the political discourse in this country has devolved markedly for a number of reasons, and in any number of ways. But when people can't, if you can't follow a 3-minute video, you're certainly not going to follow a 45-minute argument. If you can't read 2 pages of explanation of the distinction between the sacred and the profane, you're not going to dig into the 300-page argument of why one is worthier than the other. So I got the anti-cell phone thing going on. It's not just it's like every time I hear or read something about it, it just bolsters that discussion. It is ruining our brains. People can't do simple sums anymore, in your head. And like one guy was talking about, like, how many of you can remember a phone number? You don't have it's like walking around with a crutch all the time. Pretty soon you forget how to walk. Now I am a veteran gloat scroller. I don't call it doom scrolling anymore in the present connotations, but I do try to keep abreast of the news and the pivots that are working for us, some of them, and some ones that are working against us. Not that it has all that much impact on my daily life, but I like to know, I like to have my finger on the pulse of how bad we're losing the war. So those sorts of things, though, interestingly, perhaps, I actually watched in the background over the last couple of days. I somehow came across, the video is titled something like everything that they're teaching in history is wrong. So I thought, hey, to myself, this is something I'd be interested in. What it is, it's this writer who's an avowed communist who's talking about the way that they teach history and even other topics in universities and high schools is incorrect. And I'm like, they got, all they teach, the entire methodology and curriculum in these universities and colleges now is all far left, if not avowed communism. It's certainly more social activism than it is any real history. And of course, students consume whatever the professors throw at them because they can't read a book that challenges the shared wisdom that they're being force fed. I mean, that's what and the commenters in that video are taught, over and over again, man, this is great. This is, I never thought of it this way before. And it's like, yeah, because you haven't read a book since you were 7 years old. So this guy can get up there and tell you anything. You don't have any groundwork to prevent that from polluting your brainstem, because history is complicated and intricate. And if you don't understand the order of events and why things happen and the way things happen, you're certainly not going to understand why they happen or why we're in this handbasket in the final stages of the Kali Yuga. So that's one thing, right? That you read a map, do sums in your head, blah, 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 do all that sort of thing so that, to keep your brain sharp, because that's what it's here for, right? One of the things that attracted me to Odinism, if that's one word that we can substitute in here, I see you flinch. Is that Odin lives at the conjunction of thought and memory. And so what is that? That's consciousness. And if Odin is the holy archetype of religious high manifestation, then the more that you rely on your own wisdom and your own memory, your own thought, then the more that the higher you climb the axis mundi. We are the pole between earth and heaven, and as noble light-seeking beings, we should be reaching up toward the heavens, into the higher realms of consciousness. So that's that part of that. The other thing, and we can bring in discuss it. The other big point that I wanted to try to work in tonight, review, is the idea of discipline. It is named as one of the 9 noble virtues, which is a distillation and not a set of commandments. But discipline, self-discipline, again, is a way of manifesting the higher self. I looked at a review of a study that said that talked about, if you teach children delayed gratification, like the more, what they did is they tested kids who could demonstrate delayed gratification. In other words, if you wait 5 minutes before you eat this M&M, I'll give you 5 M&Ms. And some kids can't wait. They eat the one M&M. Those kids don't do well. But if you can teach your children, wait and we'll do something later, those kids do better. They do better in school. They earn more money lifetime. And, and part of that too, and it relates to being in debt, right? If you, like, maybe you do want a nice car. Well, but if you wait and save and pay for a nice car in cash in 3 years, you can drive a nicer car than you would if you were making payments for 10 years. I mean, most car payments now are 8 years long. It's just patently absurd. But again, that's the idea of delayed gratification. I want a better car, but I'm willing to wait and, put some new tires on this junker so it'll get me to work safely for the next 2 years while I save up money and buy a better car. So better stuff, but later is a way of manifesting discipline. as is all the other things that, Matt, some of the things that you've talked about, going to the gym when you don't feel like it, getting up and going to work when you don't feel like it. I mean, there are plenty of times when I would rather be doing something else, but you do your duty, right? You get up and fight the good fight. Nisha says we must imagine Sisyphus happy.
So while we got to pause, Stephen in Japan donated $10 to Phrase Off, $5 towards the pavilion. Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate you. Got a couple of questions lining up here. Nick in New Hampshire asks, if scientists say that 99.9% of species to ever exist have gone extinct, we as a people could very easily be added to that list. How do we look at this information from the perspective of our gods? Does it mean they don't care about those 99.9%? Or us as a people, if we went that route? I try to see it as every living thing lives under a fight for survival. It is our job to prove that we are worthy of the gods and can come out of it victoriously. Alan, what are your thoughts?
I agree with that. And I have even, well, there's so many places, so many directions I could go. First of all, like when we talk about the gift cycle, our gods give us strength and we give strength to our gods. And in the same way that 88% of the species that have ever lived have disappeared, 88% of the gods who have ever been worshipped have gone the same way. The gods of the Sumerians or the Hittites or all those other tribal gods, the Phoenicians, where are they? They're gone. And yes, it is. I don't like to use the term Darwinian, but it is certainly a struggle for survival, right? And it comes back to that idea that the universe, in the broader scheme of things, the multiverse doesn't owe us anything. We have to fight to maintain our place at the table. This is a world of scarce resources, made manifest thanks to the bounty of created by Western civilization here lately. But we have to remember that our gods fight for us to the same extent that we fight for them. And so as we manifest our way into the future, they can clear the way, but it's up to us to do the grunt work and and dig the trenches and pave roads and fuel the rockets and all that stuff that reach into the sky. Because if we don't, we will go the way of the Sumerians and the Hittites and the Phoenicians and be remembered as an ancient civilization that used to be. But that's not what I want for my descendants. I want my grandparents to be remembered. I want to be remembered. And the only way we do that is to forge a future that is friendly to the folk. How's that for some alliteration? Forge a folk-friendly future.
There you go. So before I get to it, GW Farnsworth donated $25 each to paying off Sigerham itself and toward the pavilion at Sigerham. So thank you.
He's late today. He's usually first.
We changed the time on him. That's not his fault. He's about 40 minutes earlier than our previous start time. So we appreciate you very much, as always. It's an interesting question. There's a couple of things kind of packed in there. Does it mean the gods don't care about other species that have gone extinct? I don't know. I don't presume that our gods have some deep caring for all of the species on the earth. I don't presume to say that they don't care about particular species or whatnot. What I do intend to say is they do care about us. They chose, out of their benevolence and out of their far-seeing, that there is something special. There is a potential within our most distant ancestors. They imbued those most distant ancestors with the sacred elements of what makes us Aryan men and women. They gave us that divine spark, that breath, that animating force, that goodly hue. They gave that to us for us to develop and become. They saw through cultivating our ancestors. Heimdallr came with, generations of our ancestors teaching them the steps to become more than they were. The potentiality raising from thrall to king. They taught our people how to be noble and how to be better. They have taken an interest in us and our success. But yes, I think ultimately it is up to us to prove ourselves worthy. I don't think that they cease to exist if we cease to exist, but I do think they are empowered by our worship. And I think that we are definitely empowered by our, the benevolence they've bestowed on us. I think that, hopefully they would figure something out if we allowed ourselves to go extinct. But I don't know how that works in that grand of a galactic context. What I do know is it's incumbent upon us to do our part and not go extinct to the best of our ability so that we can be there to hold up our end of our relationship with the gods. It's always uncomfortable to ponder extinction. And I think that we are specially enabled by our gods with abilities and faculties that give us the ability to stave off extinction and to overcome obstacles that we might otherwise not be able to overcome. I think it's incumbent upon us to be good stewards of the intellect and the ability that we've been blessed with so that we don't find ourselves in that predicament. But, I don't apply that to other species of, be it mammal or reptile or fungus for that matter, that have gone extinct. That's really outside my purview.
And in that context, and again, in some of the idea of all these things working together in a seamless way, one of the things that we talked about last month at Midsummer Bloat, one of the great things came up for discussion is RK theory. And those two different theories of child rearing, of offspring rearing, not just for children, but there are two species. There are two distinct ways of doing things when you're raising your progeny, right? One is have lots of kids. I keep saying kids as if that's the only thing. One is to have lots of offspring and invest very little in their rearing, and just hope that enough of them survive into the future so that they can continue to reproduce. R theory. And then there's K theory, that is having very few children and investing a lot in their manifestation so that you have a so that you have a very few offspring, but you have embodied strong survival stuff in them so that they can live, and the way, like the shorthand that one of the guys said is, it's run versus kill. Like you think about mice, right? Mice mothers don't teach their kids anything. They nurse them until they can kick them out of the nest, and then they go and spread out. Whereas wolves, only the alphas reproduce, or maybe the betas, and then like the whole pack raises the kids, and they have few wolves, but they invest a lot in their training and their upbringing. And that's the way our civilization, that's the way Western civilization is manifested into the world. We are K theory. Okay? We have fewer children and try to teach them stuff and, try to help them manifest their highest selves. And that's been the way, like I was reading, like even in medieval Germany, in the medieval period and throughout Western Europe, men didn't have kids until later in life, as opposed to other types of civilizations that have lots and lots and lots of kids and don't teach them anything, and they just turn loose on the world for us to have to deal with. And those fundamental distinctions in the way that that we approach, the way we promulgate descendancy into the world, those sorts of innate characteristics are the fundamental distinctions between folk and not folk. And those sorts of folk ways are inherent in our being. And so we have to hew closely to that folkish tradition in order to continue to have and manifest our descendants so that we can live into the future as the gods want us to do. And yeah, as far as other species, we should be concerned about that, but only to the extent that, there's a thing of reasonableness, right? You don't, I actually have a history in deep ecology. I think nature has the right to exist in its own sake. But if a small species goes extinct, I don't think the gods are as concerned about that as they are if one of our bloodlines dies out.
Alan, have any of you, presupposes, hey, Alan, have you checked out Conrad Rosenberg's translation of the Poetic Edda? It is a diglottic critical edition with very good commentary and a translation with a focus on meaning. It's a work in progress, but he's gotten a lot of work done on it. I really appreciate that it's translated into English with the proper noun, or even the proper nouns. It's open source too. Are you familiar with this? Do you have thoughts?
I am not, but spell that name for me and I will go scout it out.
Conrad with K, Rosenberg, common spelling.
Okay, I will check that out. I am always open for a new translation. My particular one that I like to go to is the Chisholm Poetic Edda, which I keep here on the desk, because James Chisholm was a practitioner and not just a translator. But I will definitely check out Rosenberg's Edda, and hopefully I will be versed on that. See what I did there? Hopefully I'll be better versed on that next time I'm on here.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it myself. It is always a tricky balance on whether you're going for word-for-word accuracy, whether you're going on conveying the same message, or whether you're going on fitting the right poetic meter. All of those things were important to the original authors, but you can't do all of those things equally good simultaneously. So that's always a challenge. I like that it's the dual facing text. I always appreciate that because that lets you go back and check and examine your work. One of my favorite translations is Bellows, but going through that was fun. We catch things every now and again that are just obviously mistakes. Now that we have, an additional 100 years of understanding Old Norse and the grammar and stuff, there's just obvious root words that aren't what he chose to translate here and there. So it's really beneficial to have that dual-facing text, or a diglottic, which is the first time I've ever encountered that word. Thank you for bringing it up in the chat. I'll learn something today. How many members are we at now? 730 as of a few minutes ago. What other literature is also good? Alan, what literature is good?
What other literature is also good? First of all, so a couple things, right? I think anything in the Western canon, exclude the last 50 years, anything in the traditional Western canon of literature is beneficial reading for the Asatru, and I mean Shakespeare, the lofty flights of his language are inspirational to the to the reader, and again, to follow along soliloquy that any of his characters give. I think that that's an important exercise in shaping your mind-body complex. So as far as literature, fiction, there's some good science fiction that I could recommend. Then, like, if you want to get into the area of politics and like the manifestation of history and historiography and those sorts of things, I've got a lot of books I would be glad to recommend to you. There's I think, and honestly, one of my very favorite books that I've listened to recently is called The Prophets of Doom, where that writer, and he seems relatively friendly to the traditionalist viewpoint, but he reviews several authors like de Gobineau and Toynbee and Evola and Spencer, who see the cyclical view of history and understand that a civilization that does not protect itself is doomed to fail, and that has always been the course of history. If you look back through, Roman civilization, the Russian civilization to a lesser extent, Persia. If you look at these civilizations in a from the 1,000-year viewpoint, you can see why those sorts of things run in the cycles that they do. There's also another great book that I've listened to a couple times called A World After Liberalism, which reviews, again, several traditionalist authors, although this particular writer is not our friend. You just have to invert the adjectives. In other words, when this guy says this horrible idea this great idea tried to manifest, and then it didn't, then it didn't work right for whatever reason. Hopefully I'm answering the question. And again, I also like to read science fiction like as dessert, if you will. I read a really good book recently called Solaris, which had just a really interesting take on how life manifests itself from non-life. I think Philip K. Dick is a magnificent author with a wide range of interesting ideas. if you've seen the Blade Runner movie, the book is a quadrillion times better. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Super, super good book. I've read, fictionalized accounts of the life of yogis. Siddhartha is another really good book. Hermann Hesse, his fictionalized account of the life of the Buddha. Again, excellent stuff. How much time do we have? I have 600 books still on the shelf. Oh, and another thing, sorry, because since we are ostensibly on a religious program, one of the other authors that I can't not mention, find two authors. One is Alain de Benoit. His book on being pagan was very influential in my understanding of in the early years of my paganism. And it's interesting, Matt, you sort of mentioned it. One of his overarching ideas in that book is that pagans have tried to define themselves as everything Christians are not, which is why so many pagan ideas manifest as anti-Christianity and as anti-family and as anti-traditionalist. And that's just a wrong-headed view of what paganism, what traditionalism, which we're trying to do, or approach this from a traditionalist viewpoint, that's wrong-headed to do it any other way. Colin Cleary, again, we could quibble about some of the stuff that he likes, but I got a lot of understanding from his essays, and I know you don't, but I think so. And fine, and I'm cycling back around to say Mircea Eliade, because he's one of the founders of the idea of comparative religiosity. I may not be saying his name right, but I've read at least 10 of his books, including the 3-volume history, and it's literally this one. However wide this is, that's his 3-volume history of religious ideas. He goes back to the Paleolithic age and thinks, and he talks about what were they trying to do when man was first becoming. What were they doing? And, how has that shaped and ebbed and flowed over the millennia that have followed that? In his book, The Sacred and the Profane, I have bought and given away many times. I think that defines a lot of it helped me define a lot of the ideas in the way that I approach practice, and that's why we can, that's why, when you put on church clothes, you're entering the sacred. And there isn't, and although much is holy, few things are sacred. And his writing helped me understand that.
Okay. So that was a selection. Again, I don't know that the initial thing was intended to be that wide open, but that's where we're going with it because it entertains us to do so. First up, Mr. T, an autobiography by Mr. T from 1984. So my friend got that for me in high school as a joke, but I got bored and I forget what the circumstance was. But I was really impressed. It was a very good, well-written, thoughtful book. And it was not about our folk, but it was folkish. I would encourage you, if you have any ebon-hued friends, to encourage them to read Mr. T, an autobiography by Mr. T. Also, other thing, not really related to the topic, but a book I thought was really cool when I read it. The Perfect King, The Life of Edward III, Father of the English Nation. That was by Ian Mortimer, and he did a series on a sequence of English kings, I think from Edward I through Henry V. But it was really good, and I learned a lot reading that. I found that fascinating. Goering, a biography by David Irving, was a really good book. That's my favorite of Irving's books that I've read, but I like a lot of the stuff that he's written. Very well researched, well presented. By Evola, I like a lot of the things Evola writes, or wrote rather, but The Mystery of the Grail, Initiation and Magic, The Mystery of the Grail, Initiation and Magic in the Quest for the Spirit. I thought that was really unique and presented material I hadn't encountered before that I thought was fascinating. It kind of sent me on an interesting intellectual quest on a number of things. I think that's really cool. I also like Evola's much maligned Yoga of Power. The Yoga of Power, trying to read Tantra, Shakti, and the Secret Way. I thought that was really good. I thought it was a really good book. I think it has nothing to do with yoga and it's woefully mistitled. But I thought the information in it was really good. I thought it was a very interesting book, and I know that other people are not great fans of it. There's a bunch of little interesting things. It's hard to, we could list off cool books all night. I think a lot of us like reading, but those are some choices that I think are good and useful and on a wide variety of subjects. We have one of our members recently put out a book called Secret Hitler. I have seen that getting advertised around. It is a work of fiction that is, I don't know, some kind of a thriller work of fiction. I have some folks that have started reading it that say it is fascinating. So there is that. Really no idea what it's about, but it's an interesting cover and an interesting title. Yeah, those are just off the top of my head, some other good literature. So the next question, also intriguing. Matt, as also here you go, do you get any special attire that other Gothies don't have? Hopefully, eventually, I get all kind of cool special attire. As it is right now, my stole is bigger and it's gold. The Spekingar, their stoles are white, and the Gothar stoles are blue, the AFA colors. But that's the only different thing that I get to wear at this point. Next. Oh, okay, follow up. If the Gothar were going to wear a hat as part of their uniform, what should it be? And what would the Allshair Gothic version look like? 10-gallon? Nick, you got that picture? It would be like that. There are these funny gold conical prehistoric German hats that nobody really knows all the reasons for. And I don't think they would fit on a head very well and not fall off, but they're kind of fascinating to look at. I have no idea if we had a cool Gothi hat, what it would look like. Probably not be a 10-gallon hat. I suppose
I vote for the bowler. I vote for the bowler. That's the hat that I think is really I think that's the happening thing, the happening thing.
Would we put a feather in the side or no?
Yes, and you could put different, like you could have a gold feather, and the Witten could have white feathers, and Gothar could have blue feathers.
So let's put that on the list. That is a possibility in the future. It would not be a boat hat. I'll tell you that. Like boat hats look ridiculous. So this one's interesting. There's a quote unquote heathen truism that Thor likes dark beer. Are there any other divinely preferred beverages? I have heard and practiced that truism. There was a book, and I can't remember the title, and maybe I'll look it up when Alan's talking. I think it was by Diana Paxson, which even she gets some stuff that's kind of cool every now and again, I suppose. This book had some interesting things like that, some interesting kind of UPG, this god likes this other god likes this kind of stuff. I don't know that any of that needs to be taken overly seriously, but it is, I think that it is fun and engaging for you to consider beverage choice. You know, if you have a particular beverage that you think is special to one of our gods, I think that's, a cool thing to do. I think that many of us may make similar assumptions on similar deities. I think even beyond that, it's definitely something cool to do to your ancestors. And as I've said on this a number of times, I think when you're making personal offerings like that, you can go one of two ways. Well, I mean, you probably go a lot of ways, but to my mind, there's two good ideas on that. What you think they would like, so something that you have some reason to believe they have a preference for, or maybe harkens to a piece of their lore, or something that you really like that you would like to share with them because it's special to you. I think either of those is a good way to go. As far as the drinks that other gods might like, I think from that same book was like rich red wine was a preferred drink of Tyr. I don't know that that's historically attested, but I do think it's attested in that same book that I read about the dark beer for Thor. I think in the same book, it may have said champagne for Njordur. I tend to like the idea of rum for Njordur. One of the first offerings I ever made to the gods was Goldschlager for Freya. And I think it's a solid choice because Goldschlager is delicious. But yeah, so that's something I did. That's what I know offhand, other than the lore, talks about Odin specifically drinking mead. But I know there's people that, have wine as specific offerings to Odin. And I know there's people that have like whiskey as a preferred Odin offering. But Alan, in your time, have you come across any traditions about which gods like which beverages?
As I recall, Thor, has a particular affinity for hazelnut. And so there was a friend of mine, former friend of mine, was a brewer for one of the local commercial breweries here, brew pubs. And he asked me, and so he brewed a big, thick, actually it was a porter more than an imperial stout, but with hazelnut in the brew. So that would be entirely appropriate. To me, it is mead, both, as you say, because Odin is specifically, the winner of the mead. I have read that even the word ale, when used in the context of the lore of the folk during our formative and tribal and migration period and all that, ale was not beer, but a watered down mead. So mead's the thing. Wine was vanishingly rare until late in the period. I mean, grapes don't grow in the northern climes that was imported from Italy. So, to the extent that Tyr is the god of import export, and he's making some trades with the guys in Genoa to get wine, I guess that could be a thing. But again, I like your idea of the way that our gods are multifaceted, right? And so I don't think Odin is going to turn down a glass of whiskey or schnapps or mead, or now he might turn down a Coors Light because that's offensive, but anything else in that realm is going to be in good keeping. Anybody who has serious thought in that regard, I urge you to brew your own mead. It's not that hard. If I can do it, you can do it. And I will help anybody who wants to get started brewing mead. And in fact, I owe an email to one of the guys I gave a lot of advice to about brewing mead, and he said it was actually improved his mead brewing. So, Johnny, if you're out there, man, shoot us an email.
So that book is called Essential Asatru by Diana Paxson. Spoiler alert, it is not essential. And I don't know. I am loath to recommend any of her stuff, but it did have interesting, like a list of gods and what a UPG of their preferred beverage was. That's the first place I encountered, like in a written format, that for like the dark beer. But it is something a lot of people have kind of internalized.
If you've read all other 800 books about Asatru, you could read Diane Paxson.
Yeah, don't get confused. I would put Mr. T, an autobiography by Mr. T, well above that. I would much more encourage you to read Mr. T's literature than hers, but that is where I think that it came from. So I wanted to keep it a buck, as the kids say. Question. We have a duty to reproduce. Oh no, you already answered that. Another question, also entitled Question. Everyone likes to talk about what they think is the best translation. What do you think is the worst translation? Lawspeaker, what would you say is the worst translation of one of these?
The worst translation of the Eddas? See, you're asking the wrong guy, because I'm doing good to make it all the way through Chisholm, right? I have read, what's the other one that's real popular? You mentioned it. Crossley Holland.
Hollander, Bellows, Bray.
See, I've read Hollander. I've read Chisholm. That's enough for me, right? And I'll go into my thing about the cannings if you want, but I don't know the worst one. I've heard that the Cowboy Edda is pretty dismal, but I like Jackson Crawford otherwise for most of his work, so I'm not gonna deny him there, really.
Yeah, I don't have a worst. I wish I was more of a snob on that, where I had a really evolved opinion on like a ranking of all of them. Off the top of my head, Hollander flows the best, but is the least spot on accurate to the original text. Also, I think Cowboy Have Them All by Jackson Crawford is silly. But again, that's the intent of it. It's not a pretext, but it's not that. So can't really, I don't like it, but I can't really, that is what it's trying to be. Linguistic question. Why do you all say I seer like I seer? Isn't that as symbol typically pronounced with the same vowel as in grass? American English, shouldn't it be like Asir? So no, if you were going phonetically in American English, it should be Asir, but in Old Norse pronunciation's all speculative, but I think that the best we have to go on is Icelandic pronunciation, and the AE is pronounced like a I. It's pronounced I. But yeah, I think if you are anglicizing it, it's not wrong, because especially you're spelling it AE, so sure, Aesir. The letter that we would use is, and again, I forget whatever the name letter is, but it's like the combination AE where it's one letter, and that makes an I sound in modern Icelandic.
The name of that letter is Ash.
There you go. Ash is an I noise. Just like EI makes an A sound in modern Icelandic.
And in Latin, the I is a long E. So it's, vini, vedi, vici.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a crisis, but no, it wouldn't be. I don't think it would ever be a soft A like because it's got that next to it.
Yeah, I always think of the E as making the A long, so it's Aesir. They know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and again, to anglicize it with everything else, I think Aesir is acceptable, but Aesir is certainly the Icelandic pronunciation. In the Old Norse, it gets
Aesir.
Not because it's a name; it's a proper name. So I get that. Another question: are the Brothers Grimm a good source? I know it's a huge catalog. Alan, do you have thoughts about Wilhelm and Jacob?
I think the Brothers Grimm are a good source. In fact, I keep meaning to make my way back through this is the complete Brothers Grimm, which lives here untouched for quite a while. But I think that the Grimms, first of all, a big part of their work was comparative mythology. They were collecting these folk tales as an understanding of the folk soul. Now, that's not the word that they used, but that's the way that I understand it, like the way that our folk have manifested into the world are through their stories. So, these legends and tales taken in context are definitely a way of helping us fill out our understanding of the way that our people have understood the world and have operated within the world. Absolutely. I would take that over Diana Paxson's made up bull of crap. Except for the Thor liking dark beer, which actually sounds pretty right.
Woe to you if you're trying to set a table for the gods and you don't know the proper setting and proper preferences. As far as Grimm's go, no, I don't think the Grimms are a good source. And I say that, please hear the rest of it. I have never gotten a lot out of it. I think that their intentions were awesome. I appreciate the work that they put in. I don't think they're horrible. I would not discourage anyone from reading them. Absolutely. I think that there is a reverence people have because it was such a pioneering work and it was such a unique thing. And again, I don't hate that at all. I just don't think it was all that accurate. And I think they were working, blindfolded with one hand tied behind their back just because of the scarcity of material. But I think what they did was really pioneering and a noble endeavor of theirs. And I don't want to say, I don't want to be negative. I'm just answering the question honestly. I don't think that's a particularly fruitful use of your time digging into a lot. But again, I certainly wouldn't discourage it. And I think it is all very well intentioned. Alan, what is your favorite level of Stone Age material culture? Paleolithic, the Neolithic, the Mesolithic? What say you?
I'm really a Mesolithic kind of guy because I think that's the right level of technology. By the time we moved past sharpened flint and got into metallurgy, I think we were getting, then we were past the point we should have tapped the brakes right about then and held on at that point. And I don't know why I'm fuzzy. maybe maybe I should have not meditated so hard this morning. I'm not manifesting properly.
You're vibrating on a different frequency.
Yeah, camera
Glad
can't
you know
see
it
me.
is not my pineapple mimosa. I have no great affinity for any particular level of Stone Agery. I am familiar with more things from the Neolithic period, so I'm gonna claim the Neolithic period because there are stone monuments in Europe I have visited that are Neolithic in origin, and they were cool, and I appreciate that. Hey, Matt, just got done watching the old interview you did with Justin Garcia at the Pressure Project, and it got me thinking. What would you say to people who are half white, half non-white, but feel closer to their European side and want to practice Asatru? They couldn't be in the AFA, but would it be blasphemous for them to practice? So this is a really interesting and nuanced question. I know that there are hardliners that want me to just say, yes, that's disgusting. How dare you? I genuinely am very sympathetic for people who find themselves in that spot where, through no fault of their own, they don't fit anywhere. I wish that I had really good answers for those people, and I don't. Again, I feel like it seems incumbent upon us to have those answers, and people expect us to. But it's also, I think, a bit unfair for us to have to, unravel a knot that we told everyone not to tie. I think the best people can do in that spot is give it a shot and do their best. I think you find certain people, and again, I think that different communities and different ethnicities have different what that means. If you are half black and half white, you're not white. No one thinks you are white. You just aren't. You are black. And again, I didn't make those rules. They just are, but we also know that they are true. I think that it's very easy to get very lost in nuanced tedium and endlessly argue about what counts as what. But one of the things that's always been informative as the AFA standard is, do you look white? Are you white? Do you identify as white? Would we identify you as white? Do you check the box that says white on your census stuff, on your medical forms, on your applications for things? Everyone who's half black checks African American or black. That's the box you check because we all just know what that means. If you're half, you don't check the white box. And we all know that. So is it blasphemous? Like, the other thing is, does it damage the gods? I don't think so. Is it effective or approved of by the gods? I don't think it's optimal. I also am not going to, presume to overstep. It's not what they want of us as a community of people who follow them. And I think some of those people would be accepted by whatever else they are in that community. I don't know if maybe they form their own community of, folks that don't fit in other spaces. And I truly don't know. And I think that it's very selfish of us, and not us probably on this broadcast, but on people who are the parents of these folks, to put them in that kind of spot. think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure on that. And it's unfortunate that their parents didn't follow the teachings that we would all advise on that. And I wish that I had a really eloquent answer on that. And I don't. And I genuinely feel bad for those people that they truly don't fit in the scheme of things. Alan, do you have
That's
more?
that's another one of those things where I think that the practice of we can look at the practice, civilizational practice of the tribes during the time that the Romans were interacting with them. Like they wouldn't even marry between tribes. So like an Alemanni wouldn't marry an Ostrogoth, much less someone who looked as far different, as far different as one of the other any term that you want to use, any other race, so like the tribes wouldn't even intermarry. So that they would not approve of I had it interracial marriage, and but neither does any other, until like the extremely recent past, that was not a thing.
So another question, are our gods and our folk at spiritual warfare with other religions? Alan, what say you?
Depending on how you want to define those terms, yes. There's only so much niche available for religious manifestation in Western European folk. And so, yes, that's one of the reasons why other non-native religions have been so active in proselytizing and converting our folk. Certainly 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 100 hours ago, they have the zealotry to change all of our people so that we will have the mindset of the foreign deities that permeate modern culture. And yes, we are at war with them in the sense that, you can only be one or the other. And so we are trying to bring as many of our people home by any means necessary, so that we can supplant the parasitic faith that has been seeded into our garden. And this is, speaking of books, if you want to read a book that says that that explains all of that in a much more eloquent way than I can off the cuff tonight, the Dharma Manifesto talks about the idea that we are at war, but we didn't start it. How about that?
Yeah, I would say that we are, depending on what that means, but it's funny because I don't necessarily think that means that we individually are at war with the practitioners of other faiths. And it sounds like those two are incongruent, and I don't mean that they are, but I think that there are other folk religions that don't seek to convert our people to their faith and that don't seek to stomp out our faith. They're about their people and their advancement and about, dealing with others on a, letting circumstance determine that, as opposed to having some inherent aversion. And I think that's our position too in general. There are certain faiths that their fundamental tenet is that our faith is bad and must be wiped out. That is an avowed truth in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Therefore, those faiths are absolutely in spiritual warfare with Asatru. But I think a lot of the people that claim to practice those faiths kind of have a live and let live attitude about it, or don't really care that much, or whatever else the case might be. So I don't think that implies a certain level of behavior towards other practitioners of other faiths, but it certainly does on a spiritual level between our gods and their God, and between our religion as a big picture concept and theirs. Absolutely. And again, we didn't start it. I don't think that's inherent to our faith, but it is inherent to our faith that we stand against people that would wipe out our faith or take our people and rip them from trough to our gods. Another question, if appropriate, does the AFA have an official mead producer? Do you guys have an official producer of ceremonial grade mead? No, we don't. People use a lot of different kind of meads. We have a number of people that make their own meads. But Alan, you might want to say more on this, because of our people within the AFA that produce their own mead, I think our law speaker here is probably the most prolific in doing so.
Yeah, and whatever, at the same time, whatever is to hand is the best mead. I do like, first of all, like the small meaderies that have started to manifest now that I know Gilbert has brought some bottles from like one of the local Georgia meaderies. It's always very good. I can't remember what it's called, but like there's the meadery that makes Odin's skull and some other Viking themed meads, they're all pretty good. They're a little heavy, really, for my taste. Chaucer's is actually not bad. I mean, Chaucer's perfectly fine. That's the most commercial everywhere mead. Bunratty is not mead. If that's all you got, that's fine. But Bunratty is not mead. Drink real mead.
So, side note, it's completely appropriate to do ritual with different kind of alcohol, and you can, but know what you're doing and be intentional about what you're doing. And it kind of goes back to our previous conversation. If you want to blow it with wine or with ale or with whatever, just make sure that you know what you're doing. There's reasoning, and it's tricky when some products say they're one thing and they're really something else. Like Bunratty's good, but it's like white wine with honey added, I think. I mean, that is what it is, right?
That is what it is. I started to disagree that it is, but Bunratty's not good. I mean, it's tolerable. It's like Mick Ultra, right? If that's the only beer in the cooler, I'll drink one. But
so I like
a lot of Coors Light, so don't bring me that.
I went to Bunratty Castle, and I have been there and walked the halls and seen the thing and smelled the peat, and it just brings me back. I don't know if it's like I really like why is this to me? The champagne of beers.
Miller High Life.
High Life, there you go. I don't even think it's that great, but it's what I drank when I first started drinking with my friends, and it takes me back to a time and a place. So I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying I have a special connection to it, and know what you're getting if you want to bloat with white wine with honey in it, then Bunratty can get you there.
And I've even had some heathens that I used to practice with, they did what they called quick mead, which was they would just take some vodka and stir some honey in it and maybe dilute it with either juice or water. And they called it quick mead, which it's not quite profane, but it's right next to it. And
somebody made a quick mead with pink lemonade powder at a winter nights I was at. It was intriguing. It was very, very alcoholic. It would get you there quick. I would not prefer to do bloat with it.
Quick mead is not the friend of man.
All right, next up, new to Asatru, but I have a heavy question. I broke an oath to quit an addiction. I don't want to use again, and I want to become loyal to Odin again. Do you have any thoughts on repentance in Asatru? I want to give Alan the last word on this, but I want to say a couple of things. We don't have blanket obligatory forgiveness. Like, you don't hey, Odin, I'm sorry. Okay, it's all good. That doesn't work as a concept in Asatru. But that doesn't mean that there's not ways to repent or to reset the scales, but it is about resetting scales. And I don't know the verbiage of your oath, but a couple of things about repentance in Asatru. First step, stop. Like, if you're currently doing something that is causing a problem, stop moving in a negative direction. Secondly, can you repair what you broke? Is there a way to repay a thing that has been taken, or some kind of in-kind compensation to square with whatever you agreed to do and didn't do? But fixing what you broke is a really important concept in Asatru. And we still pretend that that's a concept in our criminal justice system, but not really. We talk about a debt to society. If society is the person that you broke troth with, the idea of repaying what you broke is a fundamental to our system of justice and fixing things. And it's kind of a first step towards repentance. If you're able to fix the things that you damaged, that's a big step. Now, there's more to it, and a lot of stuff becomes kind of nuanced depending on the situation, but I think that as a concept needs to be kind of internalized by everybody. It's not just like, hey, I'm sorry I messed up. It was thought, every infraction like that is you're taking something from someone, and it's even in an interpersonal thing. If I got on here and I cursed out Alan about something, it's not just, hey, Alan, I was having a bad night, had too much of my mimosa, I'm sorry, I'm a jerk. It would also be, hey, everyone on the show that listened to me do that, I was really wrong. I'm dumb and I'm sorry and I was incorrect, and doing something to restore the reputation that you've damaged on top of anything that you're trying to do to make amends with the person that you've offended. But there's an idea of restoring the thing that you've broken or the thing that you've taken, and that can take a lot of different forms. But I think Alan may have some more specifics on your question, so I want to go ahead and throw it to him.
No, everything you said is completely accurate, of course. And one issue that we see a lot in oaths is that they are taken with and this is one of the things we've tried to do, especially oaths that are taken in ceremony, to take things in with a specific penance if the oath is not fulfilled. But at the same time, if you took something that was less definite by this oath, I swear I will stop whatever X behavior. It seems to me that to get right with Odin, to whom that oath was taken, like now you owe him something because, as Matt said, you have damaged the relationship between you and the gods. You've damaged the relationship inside yourself. So you need to make a sacrifice, whether it is money, which is all too easy to try to set up. Typically, and because I make mead, like when I, either out of gratitude or in recompense, for me, it's pouring out a bottle of mead. That certainly would be entirely appropriate, to go down and buy some non-bun ready mead and go to your altar, your horg, not down the kitchen sink, but in the yard if that's what you have, at a tree. Restore that relationship with the gods, and in return ask for strength. I make this offering to restore my troth with the gods and ask for your help in fulfilling the oath that I took and to keep my feet on the path. The other thing is be more careful about the oaths that you take. If it helps you, whatever your addiction is, and my dad struggled with alcoholism. My kids have struggled with stuff. But whatever your addiction is, if you need help, get help. It's a tough road to take by yourself. Your Gothar will help you. I will help you get through that. Honestly, that sort of thing is the kind of issue that I try to take to my grandmother, right? Your Disir will help you. So restore your faith with Odin, leave some cream out for the house elves, ask your grandmother to keep the bad stuff away, and hold fast, mother, we're here for you.
Yeah, and good on you for wanting to fix it. A lot of people, when they fall on their face with anything they try to do, be it an addiction or whatever else, they try to run from it. Or if they break an oath, they, try to outrun it somehow. Wanting to acknowledge it and fix it and get on the other side of it, I think, is admirable in and of itself. Who is the best god or goddess to make offerings to for healing of a friend or family member? That would be Air, one of the handmaidens of Frigg. She is known as the greatest of healers, and the lore specifically talks about she is one that those that would be healers call upon for help in healing. That's literally the extent that we know of her, is that she is the right deity to call on for healing stuff, and somebody who the AFA has really worked with a lot in trying to build a relationship and beseech for healing to good effect for folks. So that's absolutely who I would encourage for that. But I think that Alan's point previous, also I would encourage reaching out to the DCR, to that person's female ancestors, to that person's ancestors generally. I don't think it always is just reaching out to the gods on it. I do think that reaching out to ancestors is a good idea too. Do you have anything to add on that, Alan?
Nope.
Cool. Speaking of which, does the AFA have a substance abuse program? Yes, we do. I would invite you to reach out to Ashley Erlinson, and Nick can put the address up. She is one of our folk builders, and she heads up our substance abuse program that we do have. And I hope that's helpful. And if you have any other, if you need
Oh, like a
anything-
substance abuse counseling program. I thought you meant like how to get access to.
Oh, no, not to facilitate substance abuse, mind you. Though there are plenty of options outside the AFA to facilitate those things. Within the AFA, though, Ashley helps with that. So I would have you reach out to her or to any of our Gothar to help you guys get in touch and help you in the struggles that you're working with. So in the Harbarthsliod, Odin tells Thor he needed his help to restrain a woman so he could have his way with her. Is this meant to be symbolic? If so, what is the meaning here? Alan, do you have thoughts on that particular poem?
I am unfamiliar with that.
So
aspect. So sorry.
So the poetry that we have in our lore is written for different reasons. And there are poems that are obviously reverential. There are poems that are meant to convey divine truth. There are poems in there that are meant to be humorous or meant to be like poetic battles with like how much art of poetry you have. This and the Lokasena are poems that are what are called flightings. And I find them to be the least valuable of the poems in our corpus of lore because I don't think they're intended to be deep collections of lore. I think they're intended to be closer to what the philosophers and the later stage Greeks would do using their gods in the form of comedy. I think it's useful because they drop hints at pieces of lore, but I think that they are set up as like insult battles between the gods. And I don't think those poems are done particularly reverently, but I do think that there's little nuggets in there that are useful. But yeah, I think those are done as body comedic things that happen to be written down that include our gods as characters. But I don't think there's a lot of like divine truth in those two poems in specific, because again, I think they're written for comedic purposes. It's one of the things to watch the poems that get referenced and used in other poems to see kind of how widespread or how important they were. And it's one of the things we're going through right now. There's some of the poems in lore that are reiterated in the prose edda, in the Gylfaginning, because they're needed to be included in there because they're super important. And then there's some of these other ones that I think are less so. And I think the tone of them is much more of the Harbarthsliod and the Lokasena that are fairly irreverent in how they're presented. Alan, who is the god you feel closest to currently? And who is the goddess that you currently feel closest to, and why?
So, it's Matt, you and I have talked about that here recently. And it's an interesting paradox or irony. I get those two mixed up, but as an attorney, I certainly feel a close affinity with Tyr, the god of sacrifice and right order. And there's a lot, I certainly think of that a lot. But at the same time, like a lot of my spiritual practice is Odinic. I meditate every day. I do Tai Chi, Kundalini, rune mantra work, all of which is the kind of deep work that I think Odin was referencing when he was talking about hanging on the tree. 9 days of long meditation, not there yet. I've done 2.5 hours, which even that seemed like a long sit. But so like my life is Tyric or Tyrian, if that's the whatever the combinatory form of that would be, but my spiritual practice is Odinic. As far as the goddesses go, I really would feel a close affinity to Frigg. The constancy, the motherhood, the shepherding instinct of the maiden, of the mother figure, I think is the right manifestation for, I think it's the right remedy for what we've seen of, too much maiden and not enough mother here lately. But, she would certainly be at this age, I'm nearly 40. So, it's time to start acting a little mature and, less Freya and more Frigg.
So I like to give people good answers on here. And these are the questions that are hard. And I think some of this comes into play. We've had a lot of questions lately about full truies, or people who have they're specifically devoted to one of the gods over the others. And I genuinely have been engaged in this in the way that I have for the time that I have, to where I don't feel like I can say that. I feel like there are gods that I am more distant from, or have not developed a strong relationship with yet. But I don't know that there's one that I feel closer to than others, because I think that I call upon them or offer to them or relate to them on different circumstances or at different ebbs and flows of my life differently. I mean, I think that Odin is a very easy answer, but I have very consciously been trying to spend a lot of time in making offerings and reaching out to Lord Tyr, especially because I've moved out here and am trying to, in the planning stages for his Hof that I'm going to be a part of erecting out here. So that has drawn me close. When we're in the lead up to getting a Hof for any of our gods, I spend a lot of time trying to build that closeness and interact with them more during that period, because that's something I'm really focused on. I mean, I think early on, I think Thor was the god that, most brought me here, or most, I had the most initial, draw towards. I would say either Odin, Thor, or Tyr, between the three of them. I don't know that I could specify further than that right now. And then the goddesses, I mean, certainly it would be Frigg or Freya more than it would be some of the smaller goddesses that are part of Freya's staff, or Frigg's staff rather. But again, it really depends on what the circumstance is. So I can't give a good answer on this, and I'm trying to be introspective. It all really, really depends. If I had to gun to my head at this exact moment, I'd say Odin and Freya, just to give you a real answer. But I think that, on the hour that might change, because I really do feel like I've tried to develop a good relationship and a good connection with a great many of them, and I continue to try to do that. Okay, so this one, there's a conversation kind of going on in the chat room about oaths. So a little piece of it, why even take oaths? Why not honor the gods with your actions? And then some back and forth about, pondering whether the gods would even care about oaths. Why not just, fix your stuff yourself? And various back and forths on that. Alan, what's your initial take on why is it important to take oaths? And, why not just do the right stuff without taking oaths?
Well, I think under the right circumstances, oaths can manifest you into doing the right thing. It is a means of, certainly it's, first of all, in the plainest sense of what you're doing, you're strengthening the relationship with the gods by interacting with them in that way, as long as you fulfill your oath. That is a way of strengthening not only your whatever it is that you're doing, but it's also a way of strengthening your relationship with the gods. And absolutely, you should. It is perfectly legitimate to do whatever it is, fix yourself without calling on the help of the gods. But there's nothing inappropriate about, if you feel like you need help. It's, I think it's pat and simple and lacks understanding to say, why don't you just do whatever? Okay. If you need external help, if you need help from the gods, if you need help from a counselor, if you need help from the Gothar, if you need help from a 9-step group or whatever, use those tools. There's nothing inappropriate about using a cable to winch yourself out of the canyon, right? If you're struggling and need help, use whatever tool is out there, and an oath is an absolutely legitimate way of doing that.
So there's two kind of oaths, like oaths between people formalize an agreement in a specific way. They build trust and they build consequence if trust isn't maintained, and they solidify loyalty in the face of hardship. Like, you wouldn't need an oath between people if it was guaranteed to have, happy, good times all the time. The oath is there for those difficult circumstances. So there is a formalized way and a particular ritualized and in some cases enforceable commitment to stick through things even when it's difficult. But oaths to the gods about certain things. There is a ritual aspect about an oath that makes it worth more than the sum of its parts. Doing difficult things and doing the right thing is good. Like, nobody's going to argue that, like, yeah, it's awesome if you can just beat your addiction by yourself. That's great. But there's something special about coming before the gods and formalizing a commitment to do a thing and then accomplishing that you've oathed to do. That ability to make that commitment in a formal and ritualized way and then complete it builds reputation and builds spiritual might in a greater way than doing it without doing that. It builds your reputation on this side of the veil and beyond. And I think that's very important. There is a pride in your ability to accomplish and your ability to follow through. It goes a little bit to some of the previous conversation we had tonight about goal setting. You know, why set goals? Why don't you just do the right stuff anyway and don't set a goal? You just get there because you're doing the right stuff. Well, you can, but there's an enhanced value about setting a goal on a timetable and then accomplishing that goal. And you build upon the accomplishment that you've made. When you make a promise to the gods and then you fulfill it, you have built a level of trust that, okay, so-and-so made this commitment and they followed through. I trust that next time they'll follow through. Doing that consistently builds good night, baby, builds your reputation in a special way. And doing certain things ritually enhances that potency and that value. Another thing, like, well, I don't think the gods care about, you know, the oaths that people make. Well, I do think they care. How much they care, again, do they lose a lot of sleep over it? Maybe not, but our gods judge us. They judge us all the time. I think they do think less of you if you make oaths that you don't follow through on. I think our Lord is clear on that. And I do think they think more of you if you're somebody who follows through on your oath. You want your actions, but our people have always been verbal. Verbal is one of the keys to magic for our folk, and it always has been. When you have an idea or a commitment or something you want to do, and you utter that out, you're removing it from the world of imagination and you're manifesting it into the world of reality. We have always been ones to make boasts or to make proclamations or to make poetry, to make these statements. That use of making verbal commitment to call your shot and do a thing is fundamental to our folk and to our culture, and it always has been. Doing that draws the eye of judgment to you, and you're enhanced if under that scrutiny you accomplish great things. And that's really what we want. We want our gods to be proud of us. One thing that I often do when I'm inviting the gods, the ancestors and the land spirits to be with us during blow is I invite them to hear our words and to see our deeds. Because ideally you want those things, you want both of those things so that they match up, so that your deeds aren't by happenstance. You've spoken a thing into existence and you've made good on the commitment that you've made. And there's an enhanced value to that. Something else has a particular value. Shannon in Georgia donated $18 towards our pavilion, and we appreciate that, Shannon. Thank you very much. So, Alan, anonymous question. Obviously, community is important for our folk, but what does that mean? Does it involve getting involved? Does it involve getting involved in each other's lives for the good of the greater community and for the future?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean that in almost every sense of the word. I mean, part of the way that we build community is by judging each other. If that's the harshest way to say that, but that's by treating each other with fairness and tenderness and love and maturity. That is absolutely a way of building the community. That's both the duty and the benefit of being in the community. You have an obligation to your folk to treat everyone with fairness and love, but also dignity and all those sorts of things, and with honesty. That way people will be able to correct themselves, if that's the right idea to try to express in this context. Because that this relationship that we have with each other, this horizontal relationship, is the right manifestation of the folk soul. We see each other in each other, and by being able to hold each other to a decent standard of behavior, a decent standard of action, then we all understand that we are accountable to each other, we're accountable to our ancestors, and ultimately accountable to the gods. And by judging each other, and I can't think of a different word, but by holding each other to accountability, then that does help build community. Because if your close friend, if your brother, if your spiritual companion won't tell you the truth, won't correct you when you're starting to veer off the path, then who's going to do that? And that I think is a big problem in current society, and why we're so far off the rails in so many ways is, first of all, we have manifested the Christian ideology that no one can judge me but God. And of course they mean Adonai, or Yaldabaoth, but that's a different discussion. So the idea that you're only accountable to God and the rest of us don't matter, that is false. We are accountable to each other. And so to hold each other accountable is a way of, keeping someone's drinking problem from becoming alcoholism, keeping someone's spending problem from turning into bankruptcy, keeping someone's abuse of their mate from turning from bad to worse, and understanding that we all owe each other this duty of care. That's what community is. And if actually, one of the things that one of my YouTube subscriptions is to the medieval mindset, and he talks about the idea that, we think about that those guys were miserable, just stuck in the same place all the time, but just you were around the 200 people that you knew the best, and the 200 people who knew you the best, and so you were in constant companionship, you were in constant troth with the people who would help you when you needed help, and you would help when they needed help. So that sort of accountability is what, in a lot of ways, is what we're trying to build in the AFA, by having COFs, for the most part, online communities, but also kindreds and local groups that can do this with and for each other, encourage each other when we're down, build each other up, hold each other accountable. Yes, that is the purpose of community, and that's a lot of the good part of being part of the fold, is being part of that community. And that's why I always tell people, being online is fine, and interacting online with other AFA members is great, but go to the HOF. I mean, yeah, it's, and you think about, that it's some giant burden to go 2-3 hours, to drive 2-3 hours. Well, not that long ago, it would have taken you 2 hours to get the team hooked up to buggy, so you could clop another hour to, go just over the order to be able to go to church. So we're just spoiled, but it's worth it to come in and manifest yourself as part of the folk.
All right. So, the stuff Alan said also, community provides context that we live out all of our values, that you know through. One of the biggest problems we have in modern society is, or in our modern existence, I think modern society might even be a myth. We don't have connectivity. You don't know your neighbors. You don't know the people in your town for the most of us. And we're all atomized, having people that know you. Some of it's reflected in our ancestors' use of patronymics. Oh, Matt who? Matt Geraldson? Oh, I know Gerald. He's awesome. Cool. You're his kid. We'll take care of you. Or, hey, who's that screwing up? Oh, all right, cool. I know your dad. Come with me. We're going to, get this handled. You have a set of eyes looking out for your people, and you have a reputation that you build in your community. You're somebody. You have a value. People know you. You know people. And that's how we're meant to be. And it's how all the other values of ours are played out. They're not internal values, they're external values. They're things that your community recognizes, that you are part of something. And we're certainly all meant for that. And Nick, can you read for me the last question? Because my private chat reset when I got booted.
Are you referring to Alan Austin's?
Yes.
Good evening, Asatru, Gothy, Matt, Lawspeaker Alan, and Folk Builder Nick. What is to be done with all the whites out there who don't seem to have a problem with other races asserting themselves, but get icky feelings inside when whites are pro-white? Is it possible the conditioning is not so deep that they become reasonable only when something traumatic happens, either to them or to society, at least for most of them? Thanks for all you do.
Alan, what are your thoughts on that?
Here's the thought that comes immediately to my mind in the framework of this question. And it relates to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And here's what I mean. That when East Berlin was communist, there was a cadre of professors and political operatives who were the most adamant communists. Like, they were the most ardent, the most zealous, and like, communism's the thing, and we're all going to be communists, and we're all going to manifest the Great Revolution, and blah, blah, blah. But immediately after the Berlin Wall fell, those same people who were the most ardent communists became the most ardent capitalists. In the moments that I feel hope, that's one of the nodes of hope that I cling to, is like all this anti-white garbage that permeates the media sphere, but nowhere else. I think as soon as we break the wall, like as soon as it becomes clear, we'll hit that tipping point where, oh yeah, you know what? Grandpa was right. This is what my grandfather thought. This is what his grandfather thought. They were right. All these people for thousands of generations had the right idea about the right approach to what we call folkishness. I think it's a delicate negotiation to get there. And if I may, I'll give you, like, one of the things talked about last month was the elevator speech, and one of the things that I sometimes think about is trying to convince an audience of people that we are the ones who hold the correct way of thinking, right? And so the way that the anti-white rhetoric has gone goes sort of like this, right? I would ask you, like, Matt, do you love your mother? And you said,
Yes.
okay. And you said, why do you hate my mother? Why do you hate my mother, Matt? You hate, if you love your mother, you must hate my mother, right? I mean, that's the false dichotomy that these anti-racists have shoved down our throat, and it's the blood libel, which is also built on a stack of lies and mendacity. But we can love each other. We can love our race. We can love our people and be completely neutral toward everything else, right? I don't hate anybody. I wish they'd stop hating us. But to think that we can't love ourselves and love our people without hating other people is just wrong. It's stupid. It's not, it's illogical. And we're finally starting to break through that barrier where people are beginning to see the fallacy of that straw man argument. High school males are trending conservative. And I think we're just going to hit that pivot point in the great cycle where it's just going to, it's going to tip back in our direction and we're going to be back okay. That's my optimistic viewpoint.
So, the question is kind of a strange one. Like, yes, it does yes, there are a bunch of people out there that are so badly abused by very intentional social conditioning that they recognize other races of people and celebrate those people asserting their will to power in the world, yet they are taught to be self-loathing and to feel guilt and feel bad, or as the questioner, feel icky about white people doing that. Those people are wrong, and ultimately, unfortunately, those people are weak. But those people, many of those people, are starting to wake up, and that's really positive. I think Alan is right that the masses wait for certain cues and then they tip into an avalanche towards whatever way certain social pressures go at certain times. And that's really interesting. We've seen small ripples of that in different ways in our time with other issues. When it was super cool to do all the gay stuff, then every single company, everything was gay, all the time gay, rainbows everywhere. And then as soon as the mood shifted and people were getting tired of that, all of a sudden silence from the same people that were huge champions of that. Where's all your rainbow stuff? That stuff just disappears a lot of places. People are very malleable that way. And I don't think that's good, but it is something to think about when we are in a position where a critical mass of people wake up and get it. Then those other people who follow trends are likely to wake up as well. And, our job is to live right, and where we can spread the word and do what we can with the resources in front of us to affect the things that we can change and we can make better. And hopefully our folk will come around either, in our lifetime or after. But we have no option not to do that. The rest is nihilism and is below the heroic standards that our gods and our ancestors have for us.
Take the white pill. Take the white pill.
Yeah. Do the thing. And in doing so, you associate with some of the best people who are out there being heroic like yourself. You are able to make your life, your family's life, and our community's life that much better. We're all better for it. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, because there's tremendous opportunity in front of us. And we're really fortunate that we have a microcosm out here in the Asatru Folk Assembly. You have hundreds of people who your actions directly, you can make their lives better. You can do good things for your community. And we're building amazing things. We're building families. We're building hofs for the worship of our gods. We're building community, and we are building and developing a faith to be here for generations upon generations into the future. And you're part of that. So do what we can to be the example for these other folks. And as they wake up, we give them a place to come home to. And we're doing that. And I'm really proud to be part of that with all of you guys.
Join the team and come in for the big win.
There you go. And you can join at onestone.org on the join link. And we look forward to all of you joining. That is our last question for this evening. Alan, thank you so much for joining us tonight and imparting your adulting wisdom for us. Nick, thank you as always for producing and all the things that you do. I look forward to talking to you all next week. And until then, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA. And remember, victory never sleeps.